Welcome to Lit Bashing, where today you can have a really short intro because I don't know about you, but I'm desperate to find out which tanks are best for the Astartes in Legions Imperialis. Actually, I do know about you because you clicked on this video to find out just that. So, yeah, let's get on with it. In last place, we have the Predators. This is incredibly sad as they're a lovely little model and they're quite survivable, but their output just leaves so much to be desired. Even at their comparatively most efficient build, which is the all las versus other tanks, they're still only half as points efficient as the best dedicated anti-tank vehicle the Astartes have available. They're not terrible if charged, but to be honest, people are likely just to be popping them with missiles from a distance. So the chance of too many close combats happening isn't great. The cannon version is a little bit better against infantry, but a lot worse against everything else. So if you must take them, big blocks of anti-tank might make good distraction carnifexes, trying to tank shots and draw fire away from your more efficient units, but they're not even as survivable as our much bigger, much more efficient tanks available, so it's not easy to see where they really fit. They are the only tanks that really look fluffy in a World Eater's force, and they're not awful in close combat, so maybe that's a reason to take them. But otherwise, not so much. They have very good range, so can pop other tanks at a greater distance than lots of their friends, but range is their only plus, and only lasts as long as it takes for the opponent to get in range of them to shoot back. In addition, las contemptors are just as good for far fewer points, whilst also being more of a melee threat. There are just much better options out there in every field. Opening our top 10, in 10th place are the Sicaran Omega tanks. This surprised me, but the maths is the maths. The lower range and fewer dice just means that even with accurate, these guys only barely outperform the autocannon variant against vehicles, but they are beaten by the Arcus in this area in big and small detachment sizes. And every other variant beats them in the other areas. These are a fluffy choice for Emperor's children with their energy-focused weapons and their speed, but there's not really any reason to take them over any other variant. They suffer from being a bit of an all-rounder, and suffer even further by being an all-rounder that is all-round not very good. Oh, and the cannons are orientated wrong on the epic scale one. At number 9, we have Land Raiders. Less than half the carrying capacity of a Spartan, each one can only carry a single Terminator, with worse weapons and half the wounds for more than half the points of its big brother. Why? Forward deployment is very nice. If you are willing to pay the 360 points to take a whole support squad of Terminators to get a, yes, frankly very silly, 37-inch charge range on turn 1, this may find some use in close combat or board control focused lists. But for 320 points, you get 2 wound versions with better guns that also have space for 4 tactical legionaries you can take with the Termies to take them as a core slot rather than wasting a support slot, and you still get a charge range of more than half the board. We'll see the Spartan again later on in the list, but for the time being, if you want very fast-moving troops, control the board early, Land Raiders may be a shout. But they're 4 times more expensive than Rhinos, which are overall more efficient and have the same carrying space, and more than half the cost of Spartans, which are overall more efficient and have more than twice the carrying space. So they rest here for now. In 8th place, anti-infantry sabres. And they certainly do anti-infantry, and not much else, to be honest. Against armoured vehicles, you're looking at one of the least efficient options available at 130 points per wound, with very little discount for taking larger units. But still, this is an infantry-focused game. Surely being good anti-infantry is enough to win in a niche, right? Well, yes, if that niche didn't have too much better options. It's not even our best anti-infantry, and anti-infantry is the only thing it can do. Compared to our next best option, the Sicaran Punisher. The Punisher, which is over a point per wound more points efficient than its little brother we just spoke about, and has some flexibility by also being able to damage land vehicles for less than 100 points per wound, and even as a mid-level threat to flyers as a secondary use. And they're both pretty speedy tanks, but the Sicaran is just more survivable, has more utility outside of its speciality, and is better in its speciality than the Anvil Sabre. So the Anviler Sabre gets to be 8th in our list because it's pretty good at taking down infantry, but the Punisher makes it 7th because it's even better at taking down infantry. It's also one of the few units we have with a specific niche in taking out armoured walkers like dreadnoughts, which means there's maybe an auto take if Mechanicum are a big thing in your local circles. Yes, you have to get quite close, within 12 inches, but that's very doable as Sicarans are very speedy. And having those niches is also what makes our 6th place make it to number 6. Number 6, the cooler sabres, neutron sabres. Still a decent mid-range infantry threat, although admittedly a very bad flyer counter. The neutron's primary purpose is what should be its only purpose, taking down super heavies. It is by far our best anti-tank option. A min-sized unit of neutron sabres is more efficient anti-tank than a full-sized anti-tank Kratos, and more than twice as efficient as a las Predator. Plus, the neutron special rule can absolutely cripple Titans, which, for an army that doesn't have a lot of specifically anti-Titan options, is certainly not to be sniffed at. Honestly, from this point up, they all have their niches and are in many regards ruled by your local meta. If you face a lot of Titans, these are a must. If you face a lot of Imperialis, these are a very, very solid option. If you're in an infantry-focused meta, as many of us are, maybe just a small unit to tie up any Titans might be the ticket. In any case, solid little mice to counter the elephantine war masters out there. Number 5, Spartan assault transports. Yes, these are very, very, very expensive. Yes, these are transports, so receive no discounts for taking multiples in a detachment, so never get any more points efficient than their standard not very. Yes, they aren't large transports for some reason, so you'll still need quite a few of them to take a full cohort of Terminators. Terminators who could just deep strike in anyway. Counterpoint, 8 World Eaters Terminators or Assault Marines with 4 Tactical Legionaries as ablative wounds with a 26-inch charge range on turn 1. The only other thing that can do this is the normal Land Raiders discussed earlier and the Thunderhawk, which might be a shout for Assault Marines, but for Terminators you'd need to hover and basically guarantee its demise before going to do much else. The suggested board width of Legions Imperialis is 48 inches. You can charge more than half the board width on turn 1. And if your opponent sees this and decides to hold back instead, congratulations, free objectives for you, and the next turn you get another 26-inch charge range from the middle of the board. You can basically charge 12 World Eaters into any unit of your choosing by turn 2. Plus the tank has a point defense gun if you don't pay extra for the las, which you shouldn't, and your laser destroyers are your best option, sacrificing 7 inches of range for the sake of better anti-vehicle results, with an optional multi-melter for even more if you have a spare 5 points left over after army building. Range is pointless, considering you want to be right up in your opponent's face, pumping out death machines anyway. Especially considering that this tank has +2 CAF, which for a vehicle at all, let alone a transport, is wild and will hold its own in a surprising number of fights. Plus the fact it's one of only 2 tanks currently available with 2 wounds. And yes, this is fun. Only really worth it if going all in on close combat, but if you're running World Eaters, you'd be silly not to run this. Arguably even sillier if you do run this, but that's kind of the point. Number 4, and I had to make a judgment call on this. And then I realized, no I don't, I can do a tied place because this is my video. So, in joint 3rd place have the Sicaran Autocannon and the Sicaran Arcus. So why are these both here? Because they both basically do the same thing, basically equally well. Just one is better in small units, and one is better in big units. Basically, if you've just got a battle tank slot to use up, but want the majority of your points in infantry, so only want a minimum size detachment, take an Arcus. It gives you mid-range anti-infantry, but top-tier anti-vehicle, and importantly, anti-aircraft. Take a couple of small units of these, and you have the flexibility to spread out across the board, making up huge chunks of no-fly zones, or at least a bit more dangerous to fly zones. Doing the same thing, but a little bit less efficiently, are the autocannon Sicarans. They are slightly better mid-range at infantry, but significantly worse anti-vehicle and flyer in small units. In max-sized detachments, they wipe the floor with the Arcus in light infantry, armoured infantry, and especially aircraft, only missing out to the Arcus in anti-tank. But to be honest, you shouldn't really be using these for anti-tank anyway. The advantage of a big unit is survivability, and of course the sheer volume of shots, especially for keeping those points efficient. The downside is you control less of the board in terms of your range. So which is better? I don't have to decide. I like both. I think I generally tend towards the utility of multiple small detachments and trying to control the airspace a little from the ground, but to be honest, both are fine. And with the easily replaceable hats they have, you don't have to decide either. In number 2 place, and not particularly close to 3, we have the Kratos variants, which are just absurdly efficient, which in a game which generally favours lots of little models, provides a great sense of variety on the table. Whilst we all know infantry spam is the meta right now, the big bottomed Kratos hold their own for justification for some pretty big tanks. Maxing out at 14.9 points per wound in min-size units against Auxilia, they are the most points-efficient anti-infantry small unit, with the exception of the Sicaran Punisher. And there's only 0.4 of a point of a wound between them. And in max-sized detachments, it's the other way around, with them outranking the Punisher anti-infantry by more than 2 points per wound. On top of this, they're the third best min-size anti-tank available, only beaten out by the Neutron Sabre and our number 1 pick to be revealed. And they are the second best big detachment anti-tank option, only beaten by a max-size unit of Sabres. They also have more efficient anti-air than any other tank, including max-size Sicarans, thanks to their 2 accurate las cannons. And all of this is just measuring the amount of shots they give out per turn. What's not included in the calculations are the fact that these are 2 wound models. So although that doesn't give them any more shots each turn, it does give them twice as much survivability into future turns than any other tank save the Spartan, as well as having the best armor save to make the most of those 2 wounds. So yes, tank, the Kratos are the best option. And the 2 weapon options are both pretty solid. Point for point, the battle cannon wins every time, and has the flexibility of anti-infantry or anti-tank profiles. However, the Melter, despite a small range, has Bunker Buster. If you know you're going to be facing a lot of buildings, and thereby a lot of garrisoned infantry, it's definitely worth considering. With a Kratos commander attached, you could feasibly be bringing a single detachment of 7 Kratos and basically destroying any other detachment you choose each turn, save for some very bad rolling. Truly, what else could be our number 1? Oh yeah. What could be the number 1 tank in a game which seems to encourage taking huge swarms of infantry over tanks? Why? A tank that lets you march huge swarms of infantry absurd distances, basically for free, right into your enemy's face. But let's briefly ignore the tactical advantage of Rhinos. Purely on firepower, a Rhino with a Havoc launcher and multi-melter is less than 2 points per wound less efficient than a minimum-sized battle cannon Kratos detachment, and more efficient than a Melter Kratos against low-armoured infantry, and basically tying against heavy infantry. And it is more efficient than any Kratos, and second only to a Neutron and Melter Sabre against a Lehman Russ. That's right, a fully tricked out Rhino is more efficient anti-tank than all but the largest Kratos detachments. Its range is rubbish, sure, so you're much less likely to get in range to do that damage than the Kratos, but also, once emptied of its contents, it's far less of a bullet magnet than its larger cousin. Yes, it's missing the extra wound, and if you don't take the multi-melter, then the chance of it doing any damage to tanks is basically 0. But it also has point defense bolters as standard, which it can fire after its inevitable first turn march, and the Havoc launcher makes it one of the most point efficient anti-infantry vehicles in the game, only 2 points per wound away from a Punisher. And oh dear, did I forget to mention that it can march infantry onto every single objective on turn 1. In addition, although these aren't assault vehicles, plop a few Rhinos with command squads in them inside, and you can commander a bunch of charge orders and first fire tokens amongst a myriad of marches and advances. The tactical advantage of having such cheap, fast transports, plus their surprisingly efficient options, make the Rhinos the undisputed kings of the Legions Imperialis Astartes tank tabletop. And the only ones I would say are guaranteed to be in every top table tournament force. Use as many as you're allowed. And there you have it, my ranking for the best tanks available to the Astartes as of right now. Will the inevitable Fellblades outrank the Kratos? Will we get some actually decent artillery? Who knows? Who dares find out? Me, I dare. So keep watching. Thank you all for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Super thanks to all my sexy Patreons. Peace and love. And please, please, keep on lip bashing.